All right, Javosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsor for 5785 Tafshin Pehei, our annual TALMUD TORAH sponsor, the Tilson Family of Am Yisroel, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this year as a zechus for besuros tovos for all of Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Tishrei, Dr. Linda Weinberg, in loving memory of her husband, Peretz Moshe ben Avraham David, and Avraham and Shaindy Kelman in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman, and Alexander and Friderica David, as well as our week of learning sponsors, Rabiel Natalie Amirian, in memory of Dr. Nilli, Ester, Ben and Malek, on the occasion of her yahrzeit. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamos will have an aliyah, the families in nechama, the merit of our hostages should be returned to their mishpachos, and our soldiers should be successful b'chol ma'aseh, and there should truly be a year of besuros tovos for all of Am Yisroel. Well, so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, a really great daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Kuf Chav Zayin 127. We are picking up on Kuf Chav Vav 126b, and we are picking up 4 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami says as follows: Tumtum shenikra v'nikra zachar v'nira zachar v'nimsa zachar. Okay, all right. What a way to start the day. Hey, so here we go. Here we go. So nothing gets you going in the morning like a tumtum. So the Gemara says as follows. So tumtum. So remember again, in halacha we always have these 2 categories of tumtum and androgynous. Androgynous is someone who is born with both male and female organs, and a tumtum is someone whose sexual organ is covered up by skin. And therefore, again, the gender of the person is not immediately known. So the Gemara says, what happens if there's a tumtum, shenikra? So then again, we'll call it the membrane or the skin is opened up, and it turns out that it's a boy. So what's the halacha? Einu notel pishnayim. This boy does not get a double portion for Bechar. So in other words, even though it turns out that he's a boy, and again, he's a firstborn boy, he does not get pishnayim. Why does he not get pishnayim? Because the pasuk says, "V'haya haben habachar l'sniya." Because the pasuk says, now the context over here is talking about a man, at the beginning of Parashas Kisei. If a man has 2 wives, and remember, this is the Yifas Torah, the war bride, and then again he has a child, the second wife, another child, and if it turns out that the eldest child is not his favorite, and he only likes better the second child, he can't favor the second child over the first child, meaning a bechar is a bechar is a bechar. So the Gemara Darshan's over here, it says, V'haya haben ha-bechar l'sniya. And it will be if the bechar, right, the firstborn son, belongs to the wife who is not as loved. So the Gemara says, Ad sheyeh ben mishas haviyah. So the lashon of haya refers to someone who possesses a particular state from the time that he is born. So the idea over here is that what Rabbi Ami is darshaning is, in order for a bechar to be considered a halachic bechar, he has to have that designation from the time of his birth. Therefore, the tumtum, because his gender was unknown at the time of his birth, he cannot be a bechor. I should say, he does not have, at least from a Yerusha perspective, from a Pishnayim perspective, the status of bechor. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, Af eno nidon keben sorer umora. Interestingly enough, he also cannot be judged like a ben sorer umora. Remember again, the ben sorer umora is the rebellious son. Why can't he be judged as ben sorer umora? Da'amakra, ki yihya li'ish ben sorer umora, ad sheyeh ben mishas haviyah. So also what you see is this common drasha of yihya, haya. These things ultimately again refer to a person who is in a particular state from the beginning. So the idea over here by bechar, v'haya, in order to be a bechar for pishnayim, you have to have been a bechar from the time of birth. In order to be a bechar for ben sorer mora, you have to be a bechar from the time of birth. So the Gemara goes, that's what Nachar by Yitzchak. Next, top of Kuf Chav Zayin 127a. Amemar said, Af eno mamait mi echelek bechora. So this is very interesting. Not only that, but ultimately, again, a person does also, such a son also does not diminish the chelek of Bechora. Ultimately, again, the firstborn portion. Now, what does that mean? He's not mamayit this chelek Bechora. So remember, again, the Gemara has referenced this a number of different times, but essentially, how do you go ahead and determine Pi Shnayim? So there's a couple of different formulas, but the way the Gemara is operating over here is that the formula for Pi Shnayim would be the following: that you take the number of sons, right, add in one additional son. Right, so let's say there are 3 sons, but you actually divide the estate 4 ways, and you give the Bechar 2 out of the 4 portions. That's Pi Shnayim. So it comes along Rabbi Amimar, and the Amimar says that if there is a tum son, he doesn't even factor into the number of children amongst whom the estate is divided. Now, the tum inherits as a son, right? He just doesn't inherit as a Bechar. What the Amimar is introducing right now, let's say there are 3 sons. Let's say there are 4 sons. And one of those sons is the tumtum. He's not a Bechar. We've already established he's not going to inherit Pi Shnayim. But let's say he's one of the 4 sons. What Amimar is saying is, when dividing the estate, we divide the estate 4 ways instead of 5 ways. In other words, had we reckoned him as a son, we would divide it up 5 ways. We don't even reckon him as a son for property division. Rather, so therefore, we'll only divide it up 4 ways. Again, he'll get a portion, but he shares a portion in the 2 remaining slots, not the 3. Okay, the idea over here is not only does he not receive a firstborn portion, Pishnayim, but he's not even reckoned as one of the brothers, a number for the property split. All right, interesting. The Gemara says, "Shnei v'yal delabanim ad shehei ben b'shas leida." Same drasha. V'yal delabanim until he is a ben from the time of birth. Rav Shizvi Amar af enonim alashmona. I'm switching gears here a little bit. Rav Shizvi said he's not even circumcised on the 8th day. Now, what does this mean? The halacha is that if the 8th day, the Yom HaMilah falls out on a Shabbos, we circumcise even on Shabbos, even though, again, bris milah on Shabbos is a malacha. The act of drawing blood on Shabbos is the malacha of shchita. But the Torah says, "V'haya bayom hashmini." Again, you are mal, you circumcise on day number 8, even if it's Shabbos. So Rav Shizvi says that is not true if it's a tumtum. In other words, let's say the baby's born a tumtum. We find out on day number 4, whatever it is, that it's in fact a zachar, that it's in fact a boy. We're not mal. We don't circumcise a tumtum on Shabbos. In other words, we will not be docha Shabbos to go ahead and be mal a tumtum. Damar kra, why? Because the pasuk says, "Isha kisazriya v'yol the zachar ubayom hashmini yimol ad shehei zachar mishas leida." So once again, the Torah, now the Gemara is darshaning over here this lashon of Isha kisazriya v'yolda. If at the time of birth it's a zachar, then ultimately such a milah will be docha Shabbos. But if at the time of birth gender is unknown, then halacha l'maisa, even if it's subsequently discovered before day number 8, you still will not do such a milah like that on Shabbos. So we'll say, what you begin to see over here is a very common thread, which is that there are certain halachas that apply to boys, but only apply to boys who are established boys from the time of birth. So Pishnayim will be one of those halachas. Ben Sorer Umora, one of those halachas. Being a son for the division of property, not getting property, but being part of the number that creates the pool through which, or based on which the property is divided, or for that matter, again, bris milah on Shabbos. All of these things require definitive male designation from the time of birth, and therefore, again, a tumtum, even though again subsequently is discovered to be, complete male, will not be subject to these halachas. Rav Sharvia Amar af ein imo mitama leida. Very interesting. Rav Sharvia says that if a woman gives birth to a tumtum, she doesn't have tumas leida. Now remember again, I will say, tumas leida is something we aren't as familiar with today, because today tumas leida and tumas nida have kind of become intertwined. But on a biblical level, aside from tumas nida, which is tuma as a result of menstrual bleeding, there's tumas leida, which is a woman gives birth. The Torah says that she is tameya, that she's ritually impure for a certain number of days, depending on a boy, if it's a boy, if it's a girl. Following those days, there are what we call yemei tara, days that the Torah says that she's absolutely tar. Beginning of Parshas Tazria. So Rav Sharvia says that if a woman gives birth to a tumtum, she does not have tumas leida. Why not? Amakra, Isha kisazria, v'yolda zachar, the Tama shivas yamim. Once again, the pasuk won't become pregnant, and she gives birth to a boy. She'll be tameh for 7 days. What do you see from here? The Gemara is picking up on that. V'yolda zachar. If at the time of the birth we know that it's a boy, then ultimately again is going to be tumas leida. Good. So Gemara says, raise the kasha. This was the first wide line. Kof chav zayin 127a. So the Gemara says, Meisvei hama pelas tumtum ba'androgynous teishev l'zachar u'lenekeva. So listen to this. The Brisa says, let's say a woman miscarries, and it turns out that the miscarriage was a tumtum or an androgynous. So that now again, obviously we don't know the gender of the baby. So because we don't know the gender of the baby, the Gemara says teishev l'zachar u'lenekeva. She has to observe Yemei Tumah, right? Days of her ritual impurity, both for a boy and a girl. Now, what that means is we have to be machmir. We don't know what the gender of the baby is, and therefore so she'll have to observe for a boy and a girl. So both says, what do you see from here? You see from here that a tumtum does generate tumas leida. So that contradicts what Rav Sharvia just said. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Tiyufta, Rav Sharvia tiyufta. You're right. In Achinami, we just saw, again, although the other positions stated regarding a tumtum seem to remain in place and intact, this particular statement of Rav Sharvia, that a tumtum does not generate tumas leida, that was effectively refuted. Shouldn't it go ahead and also refute the position of Rav Shizvi? Remember again, what did Rav Shizvi say? Rav Shizvi said that the baby is not nimol up on, in other words, a tumtum doesn't get his bris milah if the 8th day falls out on Shabbos. So let me tell you if the Rav Shizvi. So the Gemara says, Tane sapuki misapkile. No, because according to Rav Shizvi, essentially, we're not sure. We're not sure what the status of a tumtum is, and therefore, again, Tane sapuki misapkile uluchumra, and therefore it deals with this stringently. That's why the Tana over here says, and as Rabbi say, generally, the reason why the Gemara would suggest that it's kasha on Rav Shizvi is because we generally assume that tumas leida and bris milah are connected. Why? Because they're mentioned in the same set of psukim. So therefore, again, if you're going to establish that halacha l'maisa, a woman who gives birth to a tumtum has tumas leida, has ritual impurity as a result of birth, then bepashtus, I would assume that halachos of bris milah apply to such a baby as well. And if before day number 8 it is discovered that this is a boy, then halacha l'maisa, he should get his bris milah even on Shabbos. That refutes Rav Shizvi, who says that we don't do a milah on Shabbos for a boy who was born as a tumtum. To which the Gemara says, not necessarily Tana, sapuki misapkile l'chumra. Again, the Tana could just be unsure, and therefore the Tana's machmir. So Rabbi says, so the chumra manifests itself in different ways, right? So when it comes to bris milah, the chumra will be, don't do bris milah on Shabbos. When it comes to tumas leida, the chumra will be, there is tumas leida. Okay. If that's the case, in other words, if that's the case that we're mesupak and it's a chumrah, then the halacha should be teishev l'zachar u'lenekeva u'lenida mibayile. So we'll say if that's the case, then halacha l'maisa, we should be machmir all around by tumah, and we should say that she should observe the periods of ritual impurity for zachar, nekeva, male, female, and nida. Because maybe this birth doesn't generate any tumas leida at all. To which the Gemara says, kasha. You're right. That's a good question. All right. So it says, Gemara says, what comes out over here is that now, obviously, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? So remember, we're doing all of this because the statement of Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami's statement was important for this particular discussion because Rabbi Ami was the one who said that a tumtum does not get pishnayim, right? A firstborn turns out that he's a boy, but at the time of his birth, we didn't know he was a boy. Firstborn tumtum, who's then later on discovered to be a zachar, does not get pishnayim. Does not get double portion as a bachar. Why not? Based on Rabbi Ami's drasha, that in order to be a bachar for inheritance purposes, you must be a certified bachar from the time of birth. If it's only discovered later on, ultimately, again, you don't get pishnayim. Fine. So let's analyze a bit. So Amar Rava. So Rava said as follows. Both say Aman Kuf Chav Zayin 127a in the wide lines, 3 lines in. Amar Rava. So Rava said Tanya Kavah said Rabbi Ami. I have a brayso that supports Rabbi Ami. Ben velo tumtum Bechar velo safek. So we'll say, so the pasuk says, again, same pasuk we were quoting before. Kisena l'ishtena shema achasu v'achasnua v'yaldu lo banim ha'uva v'asnua v'haya habein ha'bechar l'snia. So habein, right? Bein teaches me that it has to be a certified zechus, a certified male from the time of birth, right? Not a tumtum. Bechar, what does Bechar teach me? Velo safek. Has to be that it's a firstborn child and not a safek. Okay, what does that mean? So the Gemara says, Bishlam bein velo tumtum kidrabiyami. So I understand the first part of the drasha, that in order for a Bechar to be entitled to Pishnayim, he has to be a certified male from the time of his birth. From the time of his birth. Ella, Bechar velo safek lafuke mai. But what does it mean when it says he has to be a Bechar and not a suffix? What does that mean, not a suffix? So also it's fascinating. The Darish Rava. So this is based on Rava. What did Rava say? The Darish Rava, Shtei nashim sheyaldu beis zechar memachvei. So let's say there are two women who gave birth to boys in hiding. Now, if you look at the Rashbam says this is 7 lines up from the bottom. Shtei nashim shel adam echad. So let's say Reuven is married to two, right? Yaakov is married to two women, Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah, everyone's in hiding. And Rachel and Leah both give birth to boys. What's the challenge? The challenge is we don't know who is the firstborn. Now remember again, both of these sons, although both of these boys are sons of Yaakov. Right? One father, two mothers, both give birth to boys. We're not sure who was born first. And therefore again, remember, so Pishnayim, double portion, goes to the Bechar of the father. So we don't know who gave birth first. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Kosvin harsha zelazeh. So this is very interesting. So the Gemara says, now we'll say, here's the issue. So let's fast forward a little bit, right? And let's say, again, Baruch Hashem come out of hiding. We're still not sure who the Bechar is. And Yaakov has a number of other children, right? So let's say Yaakov has 12 sons, right? All together. And now, so what happens? Now, 120 years later, Yaakov passes away. So these first two boys, again, one of them wants to collect the Bechorah. The other brothers say, no, we're not giving you anything. Prove that you are the Bechar. Now the issue over here is neither of these boys could prove who's the Bechar. What do they know? One of them is the Bechar, right? So what could they do? So this is actually fascinating. So Rava says, or the Gebraisa says, that they could write a shtar harsha. They could write a shtar harsha. So a harsha essentially means, the way we translate a harsha today is a power of attorney. Like when you sell your chametz, right? That document that you write empowering whoever you see your rabbi to go ahead and sell the chametz, that's called the shtar harsha, power of attorney. It's entitling someone to do something. So here's what's interesting. Gemara says they could each essentially write shtar harsha for the other. In other words, that let's say for example, son 1 writes a shtar harsha for son 2, essentially saying like this, right? Either you're the Bechar or I'm the Bechar. If I'm the Bechar, I am empowering you to collect the Bechorah on my behalf. And if you're the Bechar, you're collecting it on your behalf. Now, after they collect it, what are they going to do? They'll split it. Because remember, again, no one knows who the Bechar is over here. But at least if they kind of write that shtar harsha for each other, the firstborn portion can be collected and then be split amongst the two of them. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Amalei Rav Papa L'Rava, Vaha Shalach Ravin. So I says, okay, so that's the halacha. Now watch this. This is fascinating. Sorry. Amalei Rav Papa L'Rava. So Rav Papa says, Rava, Vaha Shalach Ravin. Ravin sent the following message. Davar zeh sha'alti l'chora bosai. I asked about this case to all of my teachers. V'lo amru li davar. No one said anything about it. Baram kach amru mishum Rabbi Yanai. But yet, later on I heard in the name of Rabbi Yanai something very important. Hukru ulabasof nisarvu kosin harsha zelazeh. Lo hukru ein kosin harsha zelazeh. So we'll say this is quite fascinating. So Rabbi Yanai qualified this case. He's like, 1 second, hold up. When could these two boys write the shtar harsha? When at some point in time we knew who the Bechar was, and then subsequently there was a mix-up. In other words, for example, right, Yaakov, Rachel, and Leah are in hiding. Rachel and Leah give birth. At some point in time, we know who the Bechar was. Then some type of mix-up happened. Again, they're in hiding. That's why the Gemara sets this up as a case in hiding, where there could be some type of confusion. So we knew who the Bechar was, and then afterwards there was a mix-up about who is the Bechar. Rabbi Yanai says, that's when later on they could write a shtar harsha, the power of attorney one to the other, collect the firstborn portion, and then divide it amongst the two of them. But if it was never known who the Bechar was, they can't write a shtar harsha for each other. Now both say this makes a lot of sense. Why does it make a lot of sense? This loops back to Rabbi Ami. What did Rabbi Ami say? Right, Rabbi Ami said a tumtum can't collect pishnayim. Why not? Why not? Because in order to go ahead and collect pishnayim, you have to be a certified zocher, male from birth. Now, what the Gemara is introducing is there's something additional here, which is you have to be a certified male. What else do you need? There has to be a moment of clarity about who the Bechar was. If there was never a moment of clarity about who the Bechar was, so there was never at any point a certified Bechar, then no one could collect Pishnayim. It's a fascinating almost extension of what we learned. There's even have to be a certified male. There has to be a moment in time where at least, again, for some moment, we knew who the Bechar was. Okay, subsequently it got mixed up. Says Rabbi Yanai says, Hokru, so the Gemara says, Hokru in, lo Hokru, in Kolsin Shtar Shah Zelazeh. Says Rabbi Yanai, as long as we knew even for a moment who the Bechar was, and then there was subsequent confusion, so then they could employ this whole concept of collecting the Shtar Harsha. But if no one ever knew who the Bechar was, in other words, it was confusion from the beginning, then halacha l'maisa, there is no pishnayim. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Uki Rava Amora Alei V'darash. So Rava then subsequently went ahead and dashed. And so Rava says, remember again, so I want to point out, Rava was the one who originally said this halacha, right? Now, in Rava's iteration of the halacha, he did not mention anything about, we did know the Bechar was, we didn't know, the way Rava set up the case is Yaakov was married to Rachel and Leah, everybody's in hiding, Rachel and Leah each gave birth to a boy, we don't know who the Bechar is. In order for these boys to collect a pishnayim portion, they have to add a shtar harsha one to the other. Rabbi Yanai came along, Rabbi Yanai said, 1 second, that's only true if at least for one moment we knew who the Bechar was. But if we never knew who the Bechar was, then no one is entitled to go ahead and collect pishnayim. If you take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment, 5 lines up from the bottom, the Rashbam says, Hokru, Bishas Leida, so as long as we knew, even for a moment at the time of birth, who the Bechar was, even though the boys were subsequently mixed up afterwards, the could go into the hokru klal. So we'll say, so this is the same drasha as the tumtum drasha. That's why all of this is coming together. What did Rabbi Ami call it? Rabbi Ami said, the Pasuk says, V'haya haben habachar. So Rabbi Ami used it to teach us that what? In order for a boy to inherit pishnayim, he has to be a certified zocher, certified male at the time that he's born, not a tumtum, who's discovered later on. Now the Gemara is bringing this up. Now comes along Rabbi Yanai, and Rabbi Yanai says, same thing over here. In order for a Bechar to collect pishnayim, v'haya haben Bechar. The identity of the firstborn son must have been unequivocally, positively known at the time of birth, even if it was just for a moment. And then subsequently they got mixed up. But if it was never known who the Bechar was at the time of his birth, then halacha l'maisa, there's no pishnayim. Incredible. So therefore, Rava didn't make this distinction. Rabbi Yanai made this distinction. Look how the story ends. Uki Rava Amora alei. So listen to this. Rava went ahead and appointed an Amora. They're both saying, who's an Amora? The Amora is the person, remember again, who would take the Rebbe's statements and go ahead and disseminate it to the public. So sometimes we would be taking a complicated concept and kind of distilling it down to more intellectually digestible pieces that the masses could ingest. And sometimes it was just about taking whatever the Rebbe said and just publicizing it. So Rava went ahead and established an Amora. V'darsh, look what he says. V'darish, Dvarim sha'amarti lachem taos hein biyadi. Rava said, I made a mistake. Now what Rava is saying essentially is that Allah Lamaisa, again, I made a mistake. Baram, kach ar mishur Rabbi Yanai. So what is correct? What is correct is the Rabbi Yanai said it. Hukru ulubasof nisarvu kosvin harsha zelazeh. Lo hukru ein kosvin harsha zelazeh. So Rava retracted his position, and Rava said that Allah follows Rabbi Yanai. Namely, again, If at the time of their birth it was known who is who, right? If at the time of their birth it was known that halacha l'maisa, again, one was the bachar, even though subsequently they went ahead and they got mixed up, you satisfy the criteria of v'haya haben habachar, then you could employ this idea of them writing a shtar harsha, one for the other. But if there was firstborn identity ambiguity from the beginning, in other words, we never knew who the bachar was, then ultimately, again, no one has the ability to collect pishnayim because you have not satisfied the criteria of v'haya haben habachar. Incredible. And I will say that's how the Rambam Paskins as well. I just want to point out how overwhelmingly amazing this is. Right? Look at that line. Rava appointed an Amora. And what did the Amora say? Dvarim shamarti lachem ta'os hein biyadi. I made a mistake. Sometimes the hardest thing in life is to say that I made a mistake. But the inability to go ahead and say that I made a mistake prevents me from moving forward in life. This is why the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva. Right? Interestingly enough, the Rambam writes, Parak Aleph, Halacha Aleph, the first halacha in Hilchos Tshuva. Kishiyasa Tshuva, v'yasra mechet chayiv lihisvados. The Rambam says, the first step in Tshuva is vidui. And what's the first step in vidui? Chatasi, avisi, pashati, va'asisi kach v'kach, writes the Rambam. It's Parak Aleph, Halacha Aleph. The Rambam says, if there is no admission of fault, if there is no admission of failure, tshuva is impossible. I'll say, do you know what is our biggest obstacle to tshuva? And this is a good time to talk about this because this is right about the beginning of time where we begin, some of us, begin our journey of backsliding, right? We're about, what are we now, 4 days out of Sukkot? So now it's about high time, right? It's Wednesday, middle of the week, first full week back. Here is already the time where we begin to exhibit those 5784 traits. The ones, right, the behaviors that I said I was not going to do, the things I said I was not going to do. And why is that? Why does it happen so quickly? So the truth is, because if we're honest with ourselves, very often when we do tshuva, what we like to do is take on positive things, which of course makes sense. New life initiatives, right? Baruch Hashem. Thank God we live in a time where every single day there's a new Yomi, right? It does like that. And tomorrow Zohar Yomi, and Kabbalah Yomi, Arizal Yomi, it's going to be fantastic. Right? So we love it, right? And we take it on and it's beautiful and it's fantastic and always growing, always this, and it's beautiful. The problem just is that real change only occurs when one tackles the things that are broken. If I'm not willing to tackle the things that are broken, if I'm not willing to set up my Amora and say, Dvarim sha'amarti lachem ta'os hein biyadi. I made mistakes, and those mistakes are biyadi, I'm still holding on to them. Until I find the strength to say, I've made mistakes, and I'm ready to correct them. And here's what I'm going to do to correct them. Chatasi, avisi, pashati, kishiyasa tshuva, v'yashuv mechato, chayiv lehisvados. Until I can recognize the stuff that is broken, and take the reparative steps to be able to fix it, I can accomplish great things. But I'll never fully self-actualize. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, that's one of the big reasons why we often find ourselves kind of hovering in a similar area in life. I'm doing a lot of great stuff, but I'm not fixing the stuff that's broken. And if I don't have the courage to fix the stuff that's broken, to be able to look at my life and to be able to say, Devarim sha'amarti, or maybe for us many times it's Devarim sha'ani osa, ta'os hein biyadi, it's hard to get the complete level of life traction. Incredible. And it's incredible that Rava set up an Amora. I don't know, I feel like he could have said this on his own, right? But he had to set up an Amora. I made a mistake because sometimes the only way to know for sure that you're going to fix your mistake is to kind of publicize it. Don't publicize your mistakes. But at the end of the day, it's fascinating that Rava did this. Okay. So the people of Akra Da'agma, that's the name of a place, sent a fine message to Shmuel. Yamdin Rabbeinu. Rabbi, teach us. Hayamuchzakin bazeh shehu b'char. So this is fascinating. Let's say we know Yaakov is married to Rachel. And Yaakov has a son, Ruvain. Let's say it's a couple of sons, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. And as far as we know, based on what we know, Ruvain is Yaakov's oldest son. There was saying, how would you know that Ruvain is Yaakov's oldest son? So the simplest way to know that someone is your Bechar is how? Right? The good old saliva test. right? If someone tells you, right, that they have an eye ailment and they need good saliva, and that person sends you to their firstborn son, that's a bachar, right? That's a bachar. So the Maisa, again, so we know that Reuven is Yaakov's bachar. Va'amar aviv al achar bacharhu, and what happens? But Yaakov says, you know what? Reuven's not my bachar, Shimon's my bachar. So in this case over here, circumstantially, we knew that Reuven was the bachar. But now Yaakov is coming along and saying that a different son is his bachar. Mahu, what's the halacha? So shalach lehu kosvin harsha ze lo ze. On the base, Kuf Chav Zayin 127b. So says this is fascinating. So what do we say? Okay, look. So now we don't know. We thought that Reuven was the bachar. Now Yaakov is saying that Shimon is the bachar. So okay, so we don't know. So what's the halacha? Reuven and Shimon should write a shtar harsha, one for the other, right? That power of attorney. So therefore, again, when Yaakov dies, look. We don't know who's really entitled to collect the Pishnayim. So they should just write a shtar harsha, one for the other. Okay. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Manav shach, what kind of psak haloch is that? Ikra banan svirale, lishlach lu kirabanan. So remember again, this is Shmuel. So they're asking Shmuel, if you hold like the Rabbanan, then send to the people of Akra. Now, again, we don't know what the Rabbanan hold yet. We'll see that in just a moment. But if you hold like the Rabbanan, then tell the people of Akra, what's the name of their place? Akra da'agma, tell them that Allah is like the Rabbanon. Ik Rabbi Huda, and if you're like Rabbi Huda, sirlei lishach lu ki Rabbi Huda. So in other words, what the Gemara is asking is Shmuel, choose a team, decide who you paskin like, and ultimately just send back who you paskin like. Now both say, now we don't know what Rabbanon and what Rabbi Huda the Gemara is referring to. We're going to get to that in just a moment. So the Gemara says the truth is, Misapkele, ik Rabbi Huda, ik Rabbanon. Shmuel wasn't sure whether he paskin like Rabbi Huda or the Rabbanon, and therefore again he sent them back like a little bit of this veiled, not veiled, but this compromised answer. So the Gemara says, Maihi, what are you talking about? What's Rabbi Huda? What Rabbanon are you referring to? So there we go, the Sanya. So we'll say this is fascinating. So the pasuk says Yakir and Alachirim. So we'll say, so the pasuk says as follows. Now it's interesting, by the way. Everything goes back to the same pasuk. Remember again, the pasuk of Pishnayim, just to give you the context, right? Beginning of Parashas Kisei, Torah says if you go out to war, right? The Torah gives the soldier the heter of Yifas Torah, the war bride. Now the Torah cautions and says it's not going to work out well, because what happens? Right, what's right after Yifas Torah? After Yifas Torah is then you marry another woman, and you have two sons. One from the Yifas Torah, one from the other wife. It turns out that you like the son of the second wife more than the son of the first wife. Right? And then remember, by the way, context, after that what happens? Ben Sora or Mora. So this is a whole progression. Now in that second section of the two sons, the Torah says, even though you want to favor the son of wife number 2, you cannot. Why? Because the wife of son number 1 is your bechar, and as your bechar, the pasuk says, Yaki. So the pasuk ki es habechar ben asnua, the firstborn son, the son of the woman now who you don't like. Yakir, you shall recognize. Recognize what? Recognize that son as your firstborn, and as a result, lases lo pi shnayim. Give him double portion. So we'll say, so this is interesting that the Torah says Yakir. You shall recognize him as the Bechar. So the Gemara makes a fascinating drasha. What does it mean Yakir? Yakirenu la'achirim. Now what does it mean Yakirenu la'achirim? A father has the biblical right to identify who is his Bechar. Right? In other words, the world might think that Reuven is the Bechar, but Yaakov as the father has the right Yakir to identify who is his firstborn son. This is right. So the halacha l'maisa, that again, so the Gemara says, Mikan Am Rabbi Huda, they're based on Rabbi Huda said, Ne'eman Adam Lomar Ze B'ni Bechar. So Rabbi Huda says, based on this, again, this is fascinating, right? The father has the right of Yakir to identify the world who is the Bechar. So even if, so therefore Rabbi Huda says, based on this, a father is believed to say, this son is my Bechar. Now, again, just to amplify the Chiddush a little bit, even if the world circumstantially knows or feels that Reuven is the Bechar, right, based on whatever it is, years of observation or whatever else, everyone always thought that Reuven is the Bechar. If Yaakov comes along and says, Shimon is my Bechar, Yaakov has that that right? Fascinating. So the Gemara says, right? And by the way, look at the Rashbam, the last white line, the Rashbam says, Neman Adam Lomar, V'afa Pli Shemach Zikin Acher Bebechar. Now what's the Chiddush in Rabbi Yehuda? The Chiddush in Rabbi Yehuda is that even though, again, we have a chazaka, that someone else is a Bechar. In other words, we've known the family of Yaakov for years. And as far as anyone ever knew, Reuven was always the firstborn son. So there was a chazaka. If one day Yaakov shows up and Yaakov says, no, Shimon is my Bechar, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yakir, a father has the power to identify his firstborn son. Okay. And the same way that a father is believed to say, this is my firstborn son, Kach ne'eman adam lomar ze ben grusha v'ze ben chalutza. So really, essentially, what the Gemara says is as follows: is that halacha l'maisa, a person has the ability to go ahead and identify the genealogical state of his son. So let's say again, Yaakov was a Kohen, and Yaakov says, it's Reuven. Unfortunately, again, had an unsanctioned marriage, and Yaakov's mother was a grusha or a chalutza. As a result, Yaakov is a chalal. Right, he's a chalal. So again, Reuven is a chalal. Yaakov is believed to go ahead and say that. Okay, so we'll say that's incredible. So in other words, what Rabbi Yehuda is highlighting is this ability, this yakir right, or ability of a father to go ahead and testify about the genealogical state of his son, doesn't only apply in a positive way. In other words, to say that Shimon is a Bechar, it also has the ability to do it in a way that genealogically compromises him, to say that he's a Ben Grusha, Ben Chalutza. Okay, that's Rabbi Yehuda. V'cham say, Eino Naaman. Chum say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He is not Naaman. The Rashbam says over here, almost right across the Rashbam, to the left. V'cham Eino Naaman, lo be'bechar, v'lo be'chalal, ukigon shemachzikin ba'acher shu bechar, ukram bitzarach hakera, kagon shebal mechadosh bekan, ve'im muchzakin ba'acher men. So let's say this. Chacham say, no. What do they say no to? The Chacham say this: if we have a chazaka, let's say again in this case, right? Yaakov is married to Rachel. They have multiple sons. And we've always known that Reuven is the Bechar. That's the chazaka. So ultimately, Yaakov doesn't have the ability to change the chazaka. Now, what does Yaakov have the ability to do? As we're going to see, so what did the Chacham do with the phrase Yakir? Yakir is like this. Yaakov and Rachel moved to town. And Yaakov comes with 3 sons, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And we say, Yaakov, who's your Bechar? And Yaakov says, Reuven. Yaakov's believed. Or where there is no information, Yaakov is believed to go ahead and testify. He is believed to say, this is my Bechar. But when we have an established chazaka, that Reuven is the Bechar, Yaakov is not believed to change that chazaka by identifying another son as his Bechar. So if I will say, this is dramatic. So now we got the full circle, right? So now, the people of Akra Da'agma sent a message to Shmuel, this exact case. We've got this guy Yaakov. Yaakov's got 3 sons, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. We always thought that Reuven was the Bechar. So ultimately, again, now Yaakov is claiming that Shimon is the Bechar. What do we do? So now, what does Shmuel send back? Shmuel sent back, so look, Reuven and Shimon should write a shtar harsha for each other, and they should collect P9 between the 2 of them, and split it. So we'll say, so why did Shmuel give such a psak halacha? Why did he say that? Now we understand it. Shmuel was unsure, do we paskin like Rabbi Huda, or like the Rabbanan? Once again, what's the machlokes? The Torah says, Yakir Oso. The father has the right to identify who is the Bechar. What does that mean? Rabbi Yehuda says, let's start backwards. The Chacham say what it means is if we have no knowledge, father is believed to say, this is my Bechar. But if we have a chazaka, father is not believed to change the chazaka. Rabbi Yehuda, father is always believed. And even if we have a chazaka, that a certain son is a Bechar, father has the ability and the right to change that chazaka and to identify another son as the Bechar. Incredible. So Gemara goes weiter. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, I understand when the pasuk says Yakir el Rabbanan, Yakir lamali. According to Rabbanan, what do you do with Yakir? Is what we just said before. But it's Sarach HaKera. No. In a case where we don't know any information, right? Let's say again, Yaakov and Rachel moved to town. They have 3 sons. We don't know who the firstborn son is. We say Yaakov, who's the firstborn son? He says Reuven, or whoever he says. there we believe the father. So where there is no information, the father is believed to clarify it, but where there already is quote-unquote established information, the father is not believed to change that. Incredible. So lamai hilchasa. So we'll say, so ultimately again, for what's the ramifications of all of this? So the Gemara said, Lemis v'lo pishnayim. We know what the ramifications are. The ramifications are to get pishnayim, to get double portion. The Gemara said, Lo yehe ela acher, ilu ba lemisrale b'matana, mi lo yavile. So we'll say, so I don't understand, why should this be any different? Why should this be any different, ultimately, again, than if anyone else were to come and to claim something? You can't give something that you don't possess. Lo tzricha b'nechasim shenafu lo me'achar mekan. No, what could we be talking about? We could be talking about, ultimately, again, possessions that came, nechasim that fell to him afterwards. In other words, after he made the declaration. Rabbi Meir da'amar adam makna davar shlav ali olam yakir lamali. And according to Rabbi Meir, who says that you can be makna things even if they're not in your possession yet. Davar shlav ali olam. What does he use yakir for? The Gemara says b'nechazim shenaf lo kishu goses. It will refer to ultimately property that falls to the father when the father is a goses. So as Rabbi say, in those circumstances, if Yaakov is a goses, he has the inability to convey anything, and therefore going to marry you the Joshua for that. Okay, fine. So we'll say, so bottom line, we're left with ultimately this machlokes between Rabbi Huda and the Rabbanon about the ne'emanos of a father. How do we paskin? So the Rambam actually paskins like Rabbi Huda. That Allah Chalamaysa, father is always believed to say b'ni b'chori. He's always believed to say that this is my firstborn son. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, even if we had a chazaka that Reuven was the firstborn son, if Yaakov comes along and says, Shimon is my firstborn son, father is believed. An incredible power that father has, ultimately to determine who is the bachar, at least for nachala purposes, at least for inheritance purposes. Incredible. Tan Rabbanon, hayam machzikin bo shu bachar. So we'll see some more interesting cases about this. Let's say we had established that a certain child is a bachar. Okay, so right, Reuven's married to Rachel, they have 3 sons. Yaakov's married to Rachel, 3 sons, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. We've always assumed that Reuven is the Bechar. That's the Chazak. Right, and now Yaakov comes along and says, no, Shimon is my Bechar. Ne'eman. Ultimately, again, father is believed. Okay, that's the position of Rabbi Huda. We've established on the previous sugya. Listen to this. But let's say we had a Chazaka that Reuven is not the Bechar. Right? And now what happens? Va'amar aviv b'charhu. And now Reuven came along and said, he is my b'char. He is my b'char. Eino ne'aman. Shabbos says, so this is a little bit of a different case, right? So in case number 1, we had a chazaka that a certain son is the b'char. Right? And now father comes along and says, no, that's not my b'char. Shimon is my b'char. Father is believed. What happens in a second case where someone had a chazaka that he's not a b'char? Right? So in other words, he has a non-b'char chazaka. And now father comes along and says, no, that kid is my bachar. He's not believed. He's not believed. So what says the Gemara says, those are 2 contradictory statements. In other words, if a father is believed, he's believed, no matter which way the designation goes. And if he's not believed, he's not believed. Which the Gemara says, you're right. Reisha Rabbi Huda, the Sefer Rabbanon. Very interesting about this. In this brisa over here, ultimately, again, the first part is Rabbi Huda, the Reish Rabbi Huda, and therefore that reflects the view that a father is always believed to identify who is the Bechar, who is not the Bechar, and the safe is the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon hold that what? Once there is a Chazaka, a father does not have the credibility or ability to undo the Chazaka. Incredible. We'll say, let's just begin the next section. Avdihu, the Chazar v'Amra Benihu. Amra Yochanan. Amra Benihu. The Chazar v'Amar Avdihu Eino Ne'eman. Listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan says as follows. Right, Yaakov is married to Rachel. They have a son. There are 3 sons. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Right, he says, Reuven is my son. And then he goes back and he says, you know what? No, it's not true. Reuven is my Eved. Reuven is my Eved. He's my servant. What's the halacha? Eino Ne'eman. He's not believed. Now look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6, 8, about 9 lines down. Eino Ne'eman. B'may da'amar hashta avdi v'leka l'meimar hayda karle mitchila b'ni mishum da'avo kibno de'ein derech likro la'avdo b'no. So Moshe, listen to this. So now Yaakov comes along and says, this boy Reuven, he's my son. And then he comes along and he says, he's my Eved. Now we ask him, Reuven, what's going on over here? If he's your Eved, then why did you call him your son? And what does Yaakov respond? All right, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with this case tomorrow. Some really fascinating cases. We'll see distinctions between family issues, tax issues, tax implications in tomorrow's Gemara. Shkayak, everyone. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a wonderful day.